Smith Show starts right now.
What's going on, everybody? Monday, the 5th day of August, 2019. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. on the Stephen A. Smith Show, which is being brought to you by mycomputercareer.edu. Training for a better life. We are live on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. 888-SAY-ESPN if you want to be part of the program. 888-729-3776 is the telephone number. We'll be joined a little bit later on in our program by ESPN NFL analyst Ryan Clark as we go around the National Football League. We already have one preseason game under our belts, and everybody else will pick this thing up in just a few days as teams get back out on the field coming up on Thursday with a bunch of games, and then on into the next couple of days. So football's in the air, football is here, and it couldn't be a better time. We'll get into all the baseball situation a little bit later on, as well as you got some teams making their move here, like the New York Mets, who have caught fire, winning 9 out of their last 10, and believe it or not, are knocking on the door of one of these wild card spots just a few games out. And the Yankees just finished up sweeping away the Boston Red Sox in the Bronx here, punctuated by the Sunday night victory last night. And boy, the defending World Series champions, you don't want to go too crazy with the Sox yet, okay? Because after all, they just won a World Series last year. This is almost supposed to be one of those like free seasons. But when you look at the Boston Red Sox right now, they are in legitimate danger of not even getting into the playoffs in 2019. They are in a world of trouble right now. So some things we'll get to a little bit later on. But it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. And we got the news yesterday that Tom Brady and the New England Patriots come to terms on a new contract extension. And when you look at it on the surface, you know, they say that it's a multi-year deal, but when you strip away everything else, it's really a year-to-year contract. And with Brady, he essentially gets himself a raise for the upcoming season. He's going to make $23 million this year, $8 million more than what he was slated to make. And that still only makes him the 6th highest paid quarterback in the National Football League. But money has never really been about the main thing for Tom Brady, at least in terms of his playing check. Okay, I know the guy makes a lot of money with endorsements. He's married to a supermodel who out-earns him. So money is not something that is necessarily a problem in the Brady household. We know that. And he has always taken a little bit less. So the team could go out there and sign other good players and to be able to surround him with quality talent. And that's one of the reasons why the New England Patriots have been as successful as they've been under Brady and Belichick. And that's why they won their 6th Super Bowl championship last year. We know that. And by making this move, it actually creates about $5.5 million of extra cap space for the Patriots here for 2019. But it remains to be seen, and I know that this almost sounds like blasphemy to some, but he is 42 years of age. And you wonder just how much longer he'll be able to play at a high level. I mean, we saw instances last year to maybe where he took a step back or two, and maybe he wasn't playing at the same level, but it was still good enough to make the plays when necessary and to help the Patriots win themselves another Super Bowl championship, as we all know. But now you strip away a guy like a Rob Gronkowski, who for so often of his time with New England was really that security blanket for Brady. And I know the Patriots did win a Super Bowl while Gronk was not out on the field. I understand that. So they've proven that they can do it without him. But it certainly would make the quarterback's job, who is now 42 years old, be a heck of a lot easier if you have a guy like Gronk in tow. And I know that there's this talk about Gronk maybe coming back in one day and maybe he's not fully retired and we haven't seen the last of him in the NFL. If that's the case, fine. But right now you have to operate. We're going to operate. The Patriots are moving forward as if Gronk isn't going to be there. So what does that mean for the quarterback? You know that they're pretty solid up front on the line. Okay, they're extremely well coached on the offensive line. They have been for years. You know that they have a capable run game, and I would expect to lean on those guys tremendously if you're the New England Patriots. That is a quarterback's best friend. You get the run game going, opens up play action. We know how successful Brady and company have been at that for years and years and years because they've just been picking on the entire National Football League. Okay, that has been the key right there. And as long as you have this guy, you have a chance. Because in this 2-decade run of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, we have seen players come and go. Good players come and go. Hall of Fame players whose services were no longer needed with the New England Patriots. You know, we saw one of those guys go into the Hall of Fame on Saturday night in Ty Law. There eventually came a point where Bill Belichick said, you know what, I don't think Ty Law is worth what he wants to get paid. Thanks for the memories. We'll see on down the road in the Ring of Honor. There have been a lot of those guys, Richard Seymour's of the world, and they move on. But the one guy who's pretty much been indispensable has been Tom Brady. Now, he's been a good team guy. As we said, he's taken less money. But also Bill Belichick understood and identified that is the guy, that is the one position where you cannot ill afford to have an inferior player. Okay, they had Jimmy Garoppolo that they drafted, and he came out there and played a little bit when Brady had his 4-game suspension until he got hurt. But Tom Brady has been the engine that has made that team go. And there's been a lot of, who's more instrumental to the Patriots' success? Is it Tom Brady? Is it Bill Belichick? And you know what? To me, the answer is both of them. The answer is both. Because I don't think one is successful without the other. Bill Belichick, great football mind, great coach. When he was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, he wasn't winning Super Bowls. All right? When Tom Brady was injured in 2008 and missed the whole season, they had a pretty decent year with Matt Castle as the quarterback, but they didn't win a Super Bowl, didn't even make the playoffs, if you remember. They help each other out. They're good for each other, and I think that they both acknowledge that. But the funny thing about it is, remember just a couple of years ago, we had that big piece written up on ESPN about, Brady, Belichick, Kraft, they're growing tired of each other. Eventually, this is all going to come apart. This could be the last time we see these guys working as a trio, as a group, as the New England Patriots, as we know them. They're still alive. They're still kicking. They're still going at it. And would it shock anybody if this team is back in the Super Bowl again in 2019? Not me. I've learned my lesson about counting this team out. Famously, the Kansas City Monday night game all those years back, which then spawned the on to Cincinnati, and then the team never looked back. And that's all this team does. They keep winning and winning and winning with this next man up philosophy. But it is remarkable. And, all my years of watching football and growing up, you never thought in a million years that you would ever see a quarterback, or in this case, what we have now in the NFL, quarterbacks, playing at a high level still at the age of 40. Remember, because by then you're supposed to be done. You're supposed to have lost a step or two. The arm isn't supposed to throw those fastballs like you did early on in your career. And maybe just from a personal standpoint, maybe you just don't want to play anymore. Maybe you lose that will, that desire. But you see what a Drew Brees is doing? You see what a Tom Brady continues to do? And right there, I just listed 2 of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. Rank them and order them however which way you want. And I think that also is partly responsible because of where we are right now and how the game is being played. Quarterbacks are allowed to go out there and almost have a sense of security in the pocket. They don't have to fear for their life when they drop back to pass because the rules are designed to protect quarterbacks, and none more so than Tom Brady. I mean, you breathe on Tom Brady. You get a flag thrown on you for 15 yards and an unsportsmanlike conduct of roughing the passer or whatever you do. You sneeze on Tom Brady, it's 15 yards. The refs do a great job of protecting him. Now, the quarterback also does a good job of protecting himself, but I was thinking about this yesterday. When we got the news about the Brady contract extension, I was thinking, and marveling at 42 years of age what this guy continues to do. I'm not 42, but I feel like garbage when I wake up in the morning. This guy goes out there and wins Super Bowls still and plays at an extremely high level. Breaking news, I don't know if I could do that at that age. I don't know if I would be able to feel that good at 42. I don't feel that good now. But you think back to some of the greats that have played this game. And Tom Brady has been compared with Joe Montana, of course. Who's the best quarterback of all time? Who's the GOAT? Who's this? Who's that? And I remember Montana's career. I saw all of Joe Montana's career with the Niners and the Kansas City Chiefs. And I thought back to the 2 hits that Joe Montana took in the playoffs in his career. The 2 most fierce hits that he absorbed. One in 86 against the Giants and Jim Burt in that game at the old Giants Stadium, which knocked him out cold in a game that the Giants destroyed the 49ers. And then in the championship game in 1990, when Leonard Marshall came from behind and completely just fell on top of Montana, I think broke one of his ribs, as a matter of fact, knocked him out cold. Just those 2 hits right there. Tom Brady ever taken a hit as bad as one of those in his entire football career? And I'm not talking about the play where he ripped up his knee back in 2008 on opening day. I'm just talking about ferocious hits like that. And the answer is no, because the rules don't allow that anymore. They just don't. And that's why I talk about the quarterbacks having a sense of security that in the past they didn't have. It's similar to wide receivers nowadays. Back in the day, if you were a wide receiver and you decided to run over the middle, you were taking your life in your hands. Because you knew that if I went over the middle, if I catch that football, or if there is a football that is thrown in my direction, there is a better than good chance that my head might be detached by the Ronnie Lotts of the world coming over the middle. Okay, but they don't have to worry about that anymore. Because safety is of the utmost concern and of the utmost importance right now in the NFL. It's a different world that we play in. It is a different game that these guys play. And I'm not sitting here trying to rain on their parade and tell you that Brady's not good, or that Drew Brees isn't good, or that these guys aren't Hall of Famers and some of the best to ever do it. But you got to acknowledge, times are different. You know, the Joe Montanas of the world, the John Elways of the world, the Dan Marinos. I'm talking about guys that just played 30 years ago. I'm not talking about, the 50s and 60s and way back when, John Unitas. All right, even those guys. The game was different when they played. It was not designed to allow quarterbacks to play at 42 years of age on a very, very high level still like this. And eventually that's going to stop. And eventually you're not going to be able to do it anymore. But if you're the New England Patriots and if you're Tom Brady, you ride it out as long as you can. The closest thing we probably have to it is probably Favre. Favre played till he was 40 years old and still played at a fairly high level at a time when the game was still a little bit more physical than it is right now. Favre's last year was 2010. If you remember that championship game with the Vikings in 2009 in New Orleans, Favre took an absolute beating that day. I still say that was probably one of the 3 worst quarterback beatings that I've ever seen as in my lifetime as a fan of the National Football League. Is what happened to Favre in that championship game in the Superdome against the New Orleans Saints and that defense. That doesn't happen nowadays. That doesn't happen anymore. So if it's working for you, if you've perfected the system, why not ride it out as long as you can? And the same thing with Brees in New Orleans. I mean, he plays indoors for crying out loud, too. It's like going into a country club and slinging that ball around. It's like arena football. Not an arena football guy. Hate indoor football. Hate it. All games should be outdoors. But those are the breaks. So while those guys continue to succeed and those guys continue to get it done almost at a freakish level, some other guys are still waiting to get back out on the field, namely Ezekiel Elliott and the Dallas Cowboys. And yes, unfortunately, we keep having to talk about this. You look at Zeke and his importance to this Dallas Cowboys team, and we know how important it is. Guy's been the rushing champion in the National Football League 2 out of the last 3 years. Okay, he is the engine that makes that offense go. And this is a team that has to take care of Dak Prescott with a new contract. You have to take care of Amari Cooper, who you paid a hefty sum to be able to get him onto your team from the Oakland Raiders last year. And Jerry Jones over the weekend says that he's pretty confident that they're going to be able to make this thing work and get all 3 of these guys names on a new contract. And you might as well. And this is something we'll get into a little bit later on when we have Ryan Clark on the show. But when you look at the Dallas Cowboys right now, specifically with Dak Prescott, remember, he's still playing on his rookie contract as a mid-round draft choice in the NFL. Those guys do not break the bank. Dak Prescott, who's only slated to make $2 million this year. I know, I say only $2 million. But that's all he's slated to make. Do you realize he is going to be the 78th highest paid quarterback in the National Football League this year? And no, you don't have to do a double take and look it up. There's only 32 teams. So think about that for a second. You have to go almost 2-3 deep on some of these depth charts. And you'll find guys that are going to make more money than Dak Prescott as things currently stand right now. The guy's only made about $1.6 million so far in his career. When I tell you that Chad Henne Drew Stanton, those guys are slated to make more money than Dak Prescott. It's got to make you cringe. But if you're the Cowboys, hey, it's your advantage. And this really isn't all that different than what's going on or what went on with the Seattle Seahawks not too long ago. When Russell Wilson was not a first-round draft choice, was a guy that they rolled the dice on in the middle rounds, and they found him, and they won with him, and they developed him, and it was good for the organization. But remember, what the Seattle Seahawks were able to do with Russell Wilson as the quarterback was surround him with an extremely formidable football team, especially on the defensive side. And you had the Legion of Boom, and you had guys that you were able to pay big money to be able to get them on your squad because your quarterback was making no money whatsoever, at least in the grand scheme of things. And they were able to parlay that into 2 trips to the Super Bowl, winning one of them. Probably should have won both of them, as we know. But they got to the Super Bowl twice. Dallas Cowboys, what have you had to show for it with Dak Prescott playing at such a meager salary? You won a division championship? A couple of times, okay. How far did you get in the playoffs? So, in a way, when you look at the Cowboys, the clock is ticking on them for at least this season and maybe not much longer after that. Because there's going to come a point where Dak is going to hit the jackpot and you're going to have to make some tough decisions with guys on your football team that maybe you can't afford anymore. Maybe you have to make some sacrifices at areas that you can ill afford to do that to, but you're going to have to satisfy the most important position on the team, and that's the quarterback. And that's the dilemma here when you look at the Cowboys. You know, it's fascinating because I'm a big believer in take care of the quarterback. It's a quarterback world. It's a quarterback society that we live in. There's no secret there. But when you look at this Cowboy team and you see how important Zeke Elliott is and what he means to that offense, he is the offense. He is the offense. I know that Amari Cooper has helped them, and he certainly was big for Dak Prescott last year when he came aboard. But are you convinced right now, legitimately convinced, that Dak Prescott is an elite quarterback in the National Football League? Is he a top 5, top 10 quarterback? I know that he's won a lot. All right, I know the wins and losses record is certainly something you could be proud of. Shoot, he's won more than Carson Wentz has won. He's been more durable than Carson Wentz the last few years. And Carson Wentz is cashing what kind of checks after he got his new contract extension? A lot more than Dak. But I just can't get past the fact that if you look at the Cowboys and you look at the way they are lined up on offense right now, that I don't know Dak Prescott could be a game-changing, put the team on my shoulders quarterback without the capable running game. I'm not convinced. And oh, by the way, the offensive line's pretty good too. It's pretty good. Good line, dynamic rushing attack, capable target at wide receiver. Those are all the quarterback's best friend. But if you're not strong in the trenches up front and he can't move the football on the ground, that just means more and more that the QB is asked to do. And in this case, I don't know if we have seen enough of that from Dak Prescott. And I'm sure that those are conversations that Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones and everybody in the front office of the Dallas Cowboys are probably having to themselves as well. You know we got to take care of him. We've already said publicly that we're going to do that. But do we really know how good this guy is? That's a tough question to ask because I don't know if the Cowboys want to even entertain that scenario. And this is even with the shelf life of a running back being what it is, which is not as long as a quarterback. As we just talked about here with Tom Brady and Drew Brees, you can play till you're 40 if things break right for you, and you can stay in one piece. Running back, not the case, especially with how many times the Dallas Cowboys feed Zeke Elliott the football. And they're probably going to do exactly the same thing. And why shouldn't they? If you have a young stud running back on your football team, in so many ways, you might as well run him into the ground. And then if there comes a time when you feel that he's slowing down and you feel that he's got a lot of mileage on the car, then you say thanks for the memories and you move on. Right? The Cowboys played this game already before with DeMarco Murray. And remember you thought that the sky was falling? And how did the Cowboys get rid of DeMarco? The guy was a dynamic player, one of the keys to the offense. And then what happened? Not long after, they found Zeke Elliott. And at the time, there was a lot of people scratching their heads. Why would you take a running back that high in the draft? This isn't a running backs league, right? You had Jalen Ramsey sitting there on the draft. Cowboys needed help on defense, and yet they decided to turn in the card with Zeke Elliott's name on it. So while it's a quarterback world, and I know that Zeke Elliott still has some money on his deal, and he'd still be getting paid, I almost want to take care of him first. Because right now, you want to maximize what he has left in terms of being a top-flight running back. And then you take care of your quarterback. Dak knows he's going to get paid. Dak knows they're going to take care of him. And as long as he doesn't get hurt and nothing goes wrong, I think there's enough money there to satisfy all parties with the Cowboys. Salary cap the way it is, they're going to have some money coming off the books. I think that in a perfect world, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, you can make it all work. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. And that was Straight Talk Wireless, everything for less, only at Walmart. As I said, we got ourselves a busy show here. Ryan Clark, our ESPN NFL analyst, is going to join us coming up next hour to go around the National Football League to weigh in on not just what we talked about here at the get-go, but you also have some other stories here that are percolating, which we'll hit on, like the Andrew Luck situation with the Indianapolis Colts. In an offseason where everything was supposed to be okay for Luck for the first time in what seems like forever, now he's dealing with a lingering calf issue, something that's been bothering him since April, and it still hasn't resolved itself. And you take Andrew Luck away from the Indianapolis Colts, you might as well just take the whole team away because they're not going to be successful. That's certainly something that bears watching. I don't know if you have the stomach for it, and I'm giving you the warning now. But if you haven't seen the picture that Antonio Brown posted over the weekend of the shape of his feet and how they look and appear right now, if you have a weak stomach, it's not for you. I'm giving you the warning. But it's something that's preventing him from getting out on that practice field with the Oakland Raiders, who we know have a lot of attention on them this season. Want to hear from you as well at 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Now, when you're hiring, you don't want to waste time sorting through dozens of irrelevant resumes. You want an efficient way to get to a short list of qualified candidates. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screener questions based on your job requirements, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. Discover why 3 million businesses use Indeed for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/hire. Search for greatness. Search Indeed. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. It's a Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
Nature Valley Sweet and Salty.
Carmelo wants a championship. I get it. Everybody wants a championship, right? But you have to also understand, if you're Carmelo Anthony, how you got to where you are. And as I made the point to Stephen A., he was hard-headed in a lot of regards. He was the guy that forced a trade out of Denver to New York. The Nuggets were making the playoffs consistently in the West, and then he goes to New York trying to be a star and things of that nature, and that falls apart. So then he goes to Oklahoma City, and according to Stephen A., he was told he's going to be the fourth option on that squad. But some people are talking about even coming off the bench, and you have that memorable clip of him saying, yeah, hey, man, they want me to come off the bench. I ain't coming off no bench.
Right.
So then the very next year, where do you go? You go to Houston, so they're thinking like, all right, so we brought him here. We thought he was going to be this role. It's not working out. He clearly doesn't want to be a bench player, so we're just going to let him go. Maybe another team will give him a chance. So a lot of this stuff, I feel as though Carmelo's looking at this situation as if he's a victim. And nah, bruh, you're not a victim here. Some of the things that you're experiencing were based on things you had done previously.
This sounds almost exactly like the conversation we had a few weeks ago about Chris Paul, right?
Yeah.
Like you forced your way out of some certain situations in pursuit of a championship or in pursuit of whatever it is,
Yes.
right? And I think that with Carmelo, the point is you asked a great question of Stephen A. Who needs him outside of a team like the Sixers? There is no team that is a mellow away from winning a WNBA. Jesus Christ.
NBA.
Now I want him to play in the WNBA. Is that an option?
Sparks don't need him.
Is that an option?
Sparks don't need him. Mystics, maybe?
No, but so we're talking about a pity contract. We are. We're talking about a golden parachute, pity contract, farewell tour. He says that's not what he wants, but that's essentially.
We've seen them before, though. I mean, Gary Payton got one with the Heat.
There you go. You know, and I'd say Gary Payton. My question to you is he deserving of a pity contract? Is Carmelo deserving of an opportunity to do it his way and at the very least, if not in pursuit of a championship, the ability to go around and say goodbye?
Let me say this. In sports, I don't think anyone deserves anything, okay? If that was the case, then Charles Barkley would have a championship. John Stockton and Karl Malone would have championships,
Sure.
okay? So Patrick Ewing would have one.
Sure.
In a lot of regards, I would say those players way more deserve it than Carmelo.
Of a championship, yes, but is he deserving of one last opportunity to say goodbye on his own terms? That's what I'm asking. A farewell tour, a
No.
2019
No.
goodbye.
No.
Quarterback Tom Brady gets a 2-year contract extension.
The Patriots have given Tom Brady an $8 million raise.
Tom Brady's going to play until he's 50.
I mean, we're all day to day if you think about it. I mean, none of us are really promised anything.
There's never been a player at the age of 42 to play 16 games in a season at quarterback.
I mean, I'm trying to do the best I can do today.
He's one of the most respected players in the history of professional sports, not just for the Patriots now, not just for the NFL.
Have I earned it? I don't know. You guys, that's up for talk show debate.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. And if you missed any of my opening segment, go check it out on demand in the Stephen A. Smith podcast, brought to you by the Capital One Quick Silver Card, earning unlimited 1.5% cash back on every purchase everywhere. What's in your wallet? And ESPN Radio is also presented by Progressive Insurance. It's making it easy to bundle your home and car insurance. Talking football, talking everything brewing around training camp and the National Football League. I mentioned Andrew Luck before we went to the break. Indianapolis had a phenomenal season last year. One of the surprise teams, really, the NFL. And remember, first 6 weeks of the season, they were not playing good football. It looked like it was going to be one of those rebuilding years again with the new coach and Frank Reich and just getting everybody back on the same page. You know, Andrew Luck getting back in there under center and working off all the rust from missing as much time as he did. And then they caught fire. And a lot of it had to do with the strength of that draft class, of course, led by Darius Leonard and Quentin Nelson. And they had a phenomenal year. Were able to go out there and actually win a postseason game and make some noise. And we went into the offseason with Andrew Luck. If you're a Colts fan, you felt a little bit confident here because this was the first time in quite a while where he wasn't going to have to be either having a surgery, rehabbing a surgery, making sure that he was getting himself back into playing football shape. Things could go about almost normal as you would expect an offseason to go. And then we get to camp. And then we get to the time when you're expected to see these guys out there, full systems go, getting ready for the start of the season, and Andrew Luck can't go out there and sling it around because he's dealing with a lingering calf issue. Then we come to find out that this is something that's been bothering him since April. Now, I don't have to remind you if you're a sports fan. We just went through a season, a postseason, in another sport, in this case the NBA, where a fairly noteworthy player was dealing with a calf strain that forced him to miss some time, to only come back to the playing court and then suffer an even more significant injury. Of course, what happened with Kevin Durant. Now, I'm not a doctor. I don't believe the two are related. We haven't heard that the same thing could potentially go down here with Andrew Luck. The Colts are being as cautious as possible because time is on their side right now. Remember, they're not going to play a game until what? September the 8th, September the 9th, whenever that first Sunday is in the National Football League. So we have about a month. And Andrew Luck, this is not his first time around the block. I think he can go in there without even having to play a single preseason game and be ready to go week one. And I think that that's how you have to approach it if you are the Indianapolis Colts. This guy is way too important to your franchise and to their success. And the difficult thing about where Indianapolis is as a program right now, when you have the year that they did in 2018, and you surprise and you exceed expectations, now everybody expects more of it. We, the media, we, the fans, and also the people in that locker room, right? They have high expectations for themselves because they know that they've done it already. And they've been there, and they could get this done. Meantime, you have the Antonio Brown situation with his, how can I put this, aching feet. It's ugly. It's not good. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if you plan on seeing it. I gave you warning. I tried to give you as much heads up as possible. If you have a weak stomach, don't even bother seeking it out because it's kind of nasty. Not kind of nasty. They are nasty. And he even acknowledged it in his post. He's like, this is what happens. I guess there's some sort of like maybe an infection or something. I don't know. But it's the bottom of the feet are not good. It's not a good look. He can't get out on the practice field, though, which is of greater concern for John Gruden and for everybody out there with the Raiders. You know, this is a big year for that football team. Not just because they're going to be on Hard Knocks here and all this stuff is going to play itself out, I guess what, starting tomorrow night. But this is a Raider team that is expected to certainly improve greatly on what they showed you a year ago. They made the splash move by bringing in an Antonio Brown. They spent all that money in beefing up other areas of that team. They had the first-round draft choices. You spent money and you brought in the high-priced offensive lineman from the New England. Look at that. There you go. They're showing it on our ESPN News simulcast here. There you have it. I don't need to look at that anymore. I'm going to look down at the table for now. But this is a Raider team that's supposed to be better. Okay, this is a team that, 6-7 wins is not going to cut it this year. They expect to have a winning season. Now, I don't think you could sit here and say that the Raiders should be a playoff team. Maybe they think so, but I think that's a little unrealistic. Not when you're playing in an AFC West where you have the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that's clearly good enough to go to a Super Bowl. They were almost good enough to go to a Super Bowl last year, as we know. You have the Los Angeles Chargers, who I think from top to bottom might be the most talented team in the AFC West. But they're dealing with their own holdout situation in Melvin Gordon, which it would be nice if they get that resolved too. But Melvin Gordon doesn't have a leg to stand on, no pun intended. And I think the Chargers are going about this the right way. Let him be the one to blink here. But the Chargers, I think, need Melvin Gordon if they want to be a Super Bowl caliber team. And then you have the Raiders. And we won't throw the Denver Broncos and leave them out too, but I think a lot has to go their way if they're going to be in the discussion for being at the top of this division here. But a lot is asked of this Raider team. John Gruden's reintroduction to the National Football League last year was a complete failure. A complete and utter failure. It's not what he signed up for. That's not what Mark Davis signed up for. And now with this Raiders team getting ready to pack up and leave and go to Las Vegas, you know what? You want to go into Vegas with at least a winning product. You don't want to show up there off a 2-14 or a team that looks like they don't know what the heck they're doing. And there's more drama off the field than you have success on the field. And I know that the Raiders have had a lot of that in their history. They had a lot of that last year, and you don't need any more of it. You seem to have finally resolved yourself and resolved the situation involving the quarterback. That Derek Carr is going to be your guy. Because if you would have told me a year ago that he was still going to be the signal caller for the Oakland Raiders, given the way things kind of evolved last year, I would have been skeptical. But Carr, I still believe in. I think that you can win with him as your quarterback. Remember, it wasn't even that long ago where Derek Carr was essentially headed for an MVP award in the National Football League until he broke his leg on Christmas Eve. And then things just haven't been the same since. But John Gruden, who's supposed to be a guy who can get the most out of a quarterback and is a quarterback guru and a quarterback whisperer and whatever you want to call it, you expect the partnership between he and Derek Carr to be a successful one. Because I don't think if you're a Raider fan, you want to go down the Mike Glennon route. That is not an avenue that you want to entertain. Division championship? Unlikely. Playoffs for the Oakland Raiders? I don't think it's that unrealistic. Let's hear from you. 888-SAY-ESPN. 888-729-3776. Let's say hi to Robert in Texas. Robert, you're on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. What's up, Robert?
My man, you know what? I got to educate you a little bit. I am so tired of people criticizing Tom Brady for his success.
Hello? Oh, we lost him. I was waiting to get educated there for a second. I'm surprised. I was looking forward to the education. Andrew in D.C. is up next. Andrew, you're on the Stephen A. Smith Show. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good, Andrew.
So I got a question about the running back situation in New York right now with Le'Veon Bell. I remember hearing rumors about him wanting to get traded by, I believe it's Gase. And so obviously he's still with the Jets right now, and he's going to get a lot of volume this year. Do you still see him being the number one back in the NFL if he has a high volume this year?
Number one back in the NFL is asking a lot, only because you have a couple of other good running backs in the NFL. You got another running back in the same city who might have that title by the end of the year, in Saquon Barkley. But, Zeke Elliott, if he ever gets into camp with the Cowboys, is going to have a big year. I think the question mark to me, and in a weird way, I would probably put him on a list of guys that have something to prove in 2019. What about Todd Gurley? The way things ended last year, the questions surrounding the state of his knee right now, how explosive can he be? That's a wild card there. But do I think that Le'Veon Bell, if he's healthy, is still one of the top 2-3 running backs in the league? Yes. And the way that the Jets plan on using him, he's going to see a lot of the football. Not just in the running game, but I think in the pass game too. Because Le'Veon Bell could end up being the best friend of Sam Darnold as we move through this season. And that is a great luxury to have if you're a second-year quarterback like Darnold, who most expect, including myself, to take a quantum leap in year number 2 under Adam Gase in this system. Having a healthy and a productive Le'Veon Bell is going to make that much easier. Let's say hi to Jose in Virginia. Jose, you're on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
Hey, what's going on, Dan?
What's up, Jose?
Not much, man. Hey, first of all, I'm from Virginia, but I'm a Beantown boy. I'm from Boston. So the first thing, I got 2 quick questions, man. First one is, do you think any other team in NFL going to have the same legacy, even though it's not over, like the Patriots had? And also, you said that Belichick.
What do you mean? What do you mean
Brady,
legacy? I don't understand. What do you mean by that?
Like doing what they're doing right now, and even though it's not over.
Do I think?
You think they have the same legacy?
No.
Yeah, and the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other one is you said that Belichick and Brady needed they needed each other to do what they're doing.
Right.
So you telling me if they have Aaron Rodgers, they'll achieve the same thing they have done?
If Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback of the New England Patriots and not Tom Brady over the last, 10 years or so, they'd be good. They'd be successful. I don't know how many Super Bowls they'd win, to be honest with you. They'd win a couple. But Brady, again, has the ability to rise to the occasion and make the throws when necessary. Look at the AFC Championship game last year. Look at the Super Bowl game. But see, sometimes we get caught up still in just wins and losses and rings when it comes to a quarterback. Like, for example, right now, okay, with Tom Brady. He's got 6 Super Bowl championships, right? If the Seattle Seahawks don't do arguably the dumbest thing in the history of the Super Bowl and throw that pass at the 2-yard line and get picked off by Malcolm Butler instead of just giving it to Marshawn Lynch so he walks into the end zone, chances are the Patriots don't win that game, and Tom Brady has 1 less Super Bowl. Is he any diminished of a quarterback because of that? Right? Like, he did everything he was supposed to do. He gave his team the lead, and it was the defense that let Seattle go all the way down the field, and then we're this close to surrendering the lead again. Would that have been any more diminishing for Tom Brady's legacy if he had 1 less Super Bowl? Things like that. It's not just what he does. And that's why, again, yes, he's the quarterback. It's a quarterback-driven league. It's the most important position, but it is a team game. It's the offense, it's the defense, it's the special teams, it's the coaching. We'll get more into this. Plus, I'll give you a list of some names that I think have a lot to prove in the NFL for the 2019 season. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. on the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
The Stephen A. Smith Show is being brought to you by Barbasol. Hey, sports fans, Barbasol is offering you a chance to score big when you join the Barbasol Shave Club. Grab your premium starter kit for just $1.99 today with code SHAVE at Barbasol.
To change the narrative and speak out on behalf of how he feels. How do you think he did? If any NBA officers are watching and watch that interview, are they calling him based on what he said today?
I think it's possible. Not everybody, but I think there's a couple of teams that might be interested in them. I think you can look at the Lakers, to a lesser degree the Clippers, but I think you can look at a team like the Los Angeles Lakers or a couple of other teams around the league like a Philadelphia or somebody that might be willing to give him a chance. I do believe that because if the man is telling you about locker room leadership, he's telling you about how he's willing to play and accept a relegated role and all of those kind of things. Melo has been universally liked throughout his NBA career. He's not a guy that's been hated and despised and has been considered to be a locker room cancer that steps away from the franchise, talks behind people's back, makes news and headlines for the wrong reasons out, or off the basketball court in regards to his basketball career, that is, and stuff. He doesn't do that. So that's not who he has been. And if you talk to him, I think that if you watch the interview with him this morning, you see a man that is clearly, as Michael Lees pointed out, has clearly been humbled, clearly recognizes that times have changed and he is no longer what he used to be, but still feels he can give you something. And, guys, I will remind you of this. Jared Dudley, no disrespect to him at all, very good guy. Jared Dudley was on the Brooklyn Nets last year. He just signed with the Los Angeles Lakers. You don't think Melo could give you something like that?
Right.
Come on now.
Yeah. No, you're
We
right.
know better.
Yeah.
You're right. Well, let me ask you this, Stephen A. If what team needs Melo? Like if you're looking for a dude to come off the bench that can, give you 12 to 15 points in limited action, or maybe sometimes you can go off for 20 points. You're a team that's looking to win a championship that can help you in the regular season, and when you get to the playoffs, can be that Vinnie Johnson type player coming off the bench. What team in the league needs Melo?
Didn't you just hear me say Philadelphia 10 times?
They need some shooters.
They need what? But
They need some shooters.
Philly.
Philadelphia. You're right. You got to remember, they lost J.J. Redick, and they lost Jimmy Butler. Now, you got Josh Richardson, but you still have Embiid, Simmons, Al Horford, okay? So when you look at it from that perspective, where's your bench? What you got coming off your bench?
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. on this Monday. And the Stephen A. Smith Show is coming to you live from above the Heineken River Deck at Pier 17 at the South Street Seaport. ESPN NFL analyst Ryan Clark is going to join us to kick off hour number 2 as we go around the league with him and throw at him some of the things that we've been talking about here in the first hour. Also in hour number 2, I'm going to give you my list of players that I think really need to prove something here in 2019. We'll touch on all the baseball matters, and we'll also look back on what I thought was a pretty entertaining weekend in Canton, Ohio with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And there's a little bit of a different wrinkle that the Hall of Fame is going to throw out there for the centennial class for 2020. If you thought that this year's class was populated, what do you see what they have in store for next year? Because it could be pretty sizable, that's for sure. So we'll bring up Ryan Clark here coming up in just a couple of moments here as we begin hour number 2 on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
The Stephen A. Smith Show starts right now.
Sitting in for and ESPN. And if you need seats to a game, download the Vivid Seats app and enter promo code CHAMPS at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Don't buy just any seat, get a Vivid seat. And Stephen A. Smith Show is also being brought to you by New Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline, now with 4 levels of defense against gunk, wear, corrosion, and friction. Preseason football going to start up in earnest here this week. And who better to talk about the NFL with than our good buddy, ESPN NFL analyst Ryan Clark, who joins me in studio. Ryan, good to see you as always, my friend.
Good to see you, my man.
How's everything going?
Everything's good. I mean, summer's over now, right?
Summer's over.
Time to get to ball.
Absolutely. And you're certainly familiar with that from all your years playing. I mean, this is the time where you're getting ready to rock and roll here. And looks like Tom Brady's going to be sticking around at least for another year, gets the contract extension with the New England Patriots. I mean, are we past the point? And look, you've had, unfortunately, a lot of games over your career and trips to the playoffs that were ruined by Tom Brady and those Patriots. But are we past the point of marveling just what this guy has been able to do for this long?
You know, I don't necessarily think so. I think it's also been his willingness to reinvent who he is, his willingness to reinvent the position he plays on that team. And I'm not talking about the quarterback position. I mean, when you look at his numbers, they're actually not very different from Baker Mayfield's in touchdowns to interceptions to completion percentage, but he made the winning plays. He was a guy who understood where the ball needed to go late in the Kansas City Chiefs game. He also understood that running the ball and playing good defense was how they were going to win the Super Bowl. And so when you can kind of do some of those things and don't have to be the guy that slings it all around the field and understand that football is the greatest team sport because it's about coming together and winning football games, and that's why he's always taking less money. He's always giving the team opportunities to build around him. So I don't think you can stop marveling at what Tom Brady has done or is doing, but you can definitely talk about it in a way that I think is from a more educated standpoint in analyzing and understanding that Tom Brady's had a method. Bill Belichick has had a method, and that method has worked for them.
And you talk about it being a team game, which of course it is. And if you look at this New England team here for the upcoming season, I mean, there are some notable absences, led, of course, by Rob Gronkowski, okay? His left tackle last year is now playing out in Oakland. He got a bunch of money. Given all that said, and maybe eventually Father Time is going to start to catch up with them a little bit, when you look at this Patriots team for the upcoming season, is there any sort of concern there might be a slight drop-off?
I think there's always concern, right? But we also look and question the New England Patriots different than we do other teams, right? Is there concern that the Rams may have a drop-off? Yes, right? Whenever you have a season that is as successful as the New England Patriots have, there's always a concern that things may change. The thing that helps this team is having Bill Belichick, having Josh McDaniels, and having a team that is able to replace and morph, right? You look at the New England Patriots, they're like the Alabama of professional football in the sense that their assistants leave, right? Why do their assistants leave? They leave to go get head coaching jobs. They leave to get coordinating jobs, and so they're replaced, right? You have players that leave, not just good players. You've had great players. Ty Law has moved on. Seymour has moved on. Vince Wilfork, Jamie Collins, and these are guys who have moved on when they still had more football to play. Is Rob Gronkowski a huge loss? He is. But this team has made it to a Super Bowl without Rob Gronkowski playing. This team has won games without him playing. And I think he's being overlooked for what he did for this team's identity, for what he did for this team's run game, and obviously we know what he was as a pass receiver. But this team replaces people, and they're going to find ways to be competitive again. So along with the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that the New England Patriots are a team that you would favor to see in the AFC Championship once again at the end of this season.
And they really don't have much of a challenge, at least as of yet, from the teams in their division in the AFC East, which makes things a little bit easier on them. And you could probably expect to see maybe a little bit of an increase in that run game this year, too, with the two-headed monster that they have in that backfield. Now, speaking of the run game, you look at the Dallas Cowboys, and we're still waiting for Zeke to show up here, and we know how instrumental he is for that offense. Zeke needs a contract. Well, not needs, wants a contract. Dak eventually has to get taken care of. Amari Cooper. Jerry said he's confident that he's going to be able to get all these guys done. If you were the Cowboys, and we live in a quarterback-driven world, where do you prioritize those guys that you need to satisfy with the contracts?
You prioritize the guys that you could lose, right? Right now, you can't lose Zeke. Now, he may sit out.
So you're putting him over Dak even?
No, I'm putting Dak over Zeke.
You're still putting the quarterback
And what
first.
I mean by you can't lose, I don't mean you can't lose like, oh, I don't want you to go.
Right.
Zeke can't go yet, right? It's not a Le'Veon Bell situation where if he sits out for the entire season, he gets to be a free agent. No, if he sits out for the entire season, he's going to have to be willing to sit out another season without pay.
And lose a lot of money.
Right. In order to prove to you that he can let little bank take big bank, but that's not how it works.
Right.
But you do have Dak Prescott, who you have identified as your franchise quarterback. We saw him come along toward the second half of the season once Amari Cooper was acquired. And so now you have to get Dak taken care of because you got lucky and got him in the fourth round. You don't have an option of a 5th year with him. So you need to take care of your quarterback. And this is a quarterback-driven league. And in the end, Dak Prescott, even though not as talented at his position as Ezekiel Elliott, will probably play in this league longer because of the position that he plays. So I think you take care of Dak first, and then after that, you try to take care of Ezekiel Elliott if it's something you're willing to do with 2 years left on his contract.
Are you confident? Have you seen enough? And you mentioned since Amari Cooper, or when Amari Cooper came on board last year, I mean, that offense was fairly prolific. But minus Zeke Elliott, do we know yet what type of quarterback Dak Prescott is? Is he in that upper tier of quarterback minus the running game?
He's not. He's not in the upper tier
Which
of
is
quarterback.
dangerous for them this year.
He's not in the upper tier of quarterback with the running game. I think if you look at this, you don't put him in the top tier where you have guys like Drew Brees, Tom Brady, where you have guys like Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. And then you go to the next level, you have the Russell Wilsons and the Andrew Lucks. And though there are no conversations where Dak Prescott belongs in those conversations, right? But if you have the running back conversation, Ezekiel Elliott is square in every conversation for a top back in this league, whether it's with Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell. And so now you see that and you think, well, we should pay Ezekiel Elliott, but it's not how it works, right? You know how they say that certain things don't grow on trees? Running backs kind of do, right? It's been proven. When you had DeMarco Murray, you ran the ball pretty well. Darren McFadden on the back end of his career, he rushed for over 1,000 yards. And so I think when you start to see some of those things, you think, okay, we can still have a running game. We can get a running game going. But right now, Dak Prescott is our quarterback. Dak Prescott is the guy we want to move forward with. And if we don't have Dak Prescott, it's not necessarily what you have in him. It's if you don't have him, who are you going to get? And I think that always becomes the problem that presents itself when quarterbacks have opportunities to become free agents.
And isn't this, though, I mean, in a way, when you look at the Cowboys for the upcoming season, couldn't this almost be viewed as if the clock is kind of ticking on them? Because you just brought it up. Dak Prescott is playing on a rookie contract. He was a mid-round draft choice. Think back to the Seattle Seahawks. When they had Russell Wilson playing on his fairly affordable rookie deal, they were able to get a couple of Super Bowl trips out of it. They won one of them, and they were able to take care of that defense when it came to paying guys. Now, if you're the Cowboys, clock is ticking before you have to give your quarterback huge money, and yet you don't even have one of those Super Bowl appearances to show for it yet.
No, we talked about it earlier on Get Up, and I think that's the more pressing issue. While you have this opportunity, while you have a quarterback who's on his rookie contract, who you see as a franchise guy, who you see as a solidified starter in this league, you have to win. Let's go to Jared Goff. He's been to a Super Bowl, right? Even though Carson Wentz was injured, he had his team in position to win the NFC East, and later on that team went to the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. And so we've seen teams really capitalize on having quarterbacks on their rookie deals and being able to build around them. And so for Dak Prescott, for the Dallas Cowboys, Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones, this is the year, right? This is the year you have to get it done, because if you're going to give out deals to Amari Cooper, if you're going to give out deals to Dak Prescott, where the bar has been set high by the Michael Thomases, the bar has been set high by the Carson Wentz, it's going to be a lot of money going to those two players. And if you're going to try to sign Zeke as well, it makes it more money going out to where you have less opportunities to build around them. So this is the season you have to get it done. But if Zeke is threatening to stay home, is that something that brings you up and says, you know what, we're going to pay you now or make you whole in some way now that gives us an opportunity to make that run this year?
Ryan Clark, our ESPN NFL analyst, joining us here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. You talk about that NFC East here for a second, and the Cowboys have the odds stacked against them this year only because it's been 15 years since a team repeated as NFC East champions. And, of course, you know, you have the Philadelphia Eagles sitting there, not far removed from a Super Bowl championship. But gone is Nick Foles, that ultimate security blanket for them the last couple of years. So when I sit there and put together an arbitrary list of players that have to prove themselves a little bit this year, Carson Wentz, to me, Ryan, is on that list because not so much with ability, he's got to prove he can make it through a full season.
That's all. He has to prove that he can continue to be healthy, that he can be a guy who can get you through 16 games plus the playoffs. And I think that's a very fair assessment, right? It's very fair to say, Carson, we haven't seen you be the starter of this team and produce and last through 2 full seasons of football. And so now you look at it, you have Deshaun Jackson on one side, opposite of Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, one of the premier pass-catching tight ends in the league. Everything's set up for this offense to play well.
Brought in Jordan Howard from the Bears.
And it all rests on Carson Wentz and his health. And so we all know about his ability. We all know that if he's not hurt 2 years ago, he probably wins the league MVP. But even with that, if he's not on the field, if he's not available, this team is drastically different. And there is no Nick Foles to spell him. There is no Nick Foles to get you over that hump. So it's going to be smart. It's going to be incumbent on him to be smart, watch the hits he takes, watch the chances that he takes, and be here for this team down the stretch.
Are you concerned at all about the Antonio Brown situation? Hasn't practiced much. You know, he decided to post that picture over the weekend.
He got some ugly feet.
He got some bad feet. And look, we all got some issues there maybe, but that was tough to stomach.
That is Flintstone-like. That is legit.
Perfect.
Like he's been stopping the car.
Comparison.
Like he's been stopping the car with his feet.
You ever seen anything like that, by the way? All the years you played?
Feet that ugly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's normal.
It is just
in the locker room.
They beat themselves up. It's terrible. They stink. This is just a bad deal. You know, the Antonio Brown thing only bothers me because of this. For all of that said about him, he's a worker, right? Everything that Antonio Brown has gotten since being a 6th-round pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers has been through hard work. He doesn't miss practices. He doesn't take off reps. He's a guy who wants to see as many opportunities to get better as any guy in the league. So the fact that foot soreness, quote unquote, is keeping him from getting reps, right? Knowing how much John Gruden, the Oakland Raiders, are depending on him, not only to play well as Antonio Brown, but to see if Derek Carr can be their quarterback of the future. I don't see him missing those things lightly. I don't see the conversation being easy for him to sit around. His game is predicated on quickness in and out of cuts, being able to accelerate, stop, and accelerate faster than other people. So if there's anything here, there's any issue, this could be a problem for the Oakland Raiders. It can be a problem for Derek Carr in that offense. And you just hope that Antonio Brown comes back soon, builds that chemistry, and you're able to see the guy we've seen the last 6 years.
And, you know, you look over at Indianapolis here for a second, and this was supposed to be the offseason, the first one, and I guess the last few, when you had Andrew Luck, who really wasn't coming off any surgeries, any extensive rehab or anything like that. It was supposed to be full systems go off of a very successful season last year. Now he's been hobbled by this calf strain, something that he first started feeling back in April,
right?
And yet it hasn't gone away yet. I mean, how much concern should we put onto that, you know, maybe this is something that bears watching here?
Well, the only thing that makes you feel better is that it's not his shoulder.
Right.
Right? You know, so that's the good thing. But not comparing it to KD at all.
I was just going to go there, and I didn't want it, but I'm glad you did.
Not comparing it to KD at all. But I remember the chatter being, man, this is a long time for a calf. I remember the chatter being, this is a lot going on for a calf. And now, my hopes is they're being extremely cautious because of his last rehab opportunity, because of the shoulder and how long it took him to get back or how long it took him to be 100% healthy. And they understand without Andrew Luck, even though it's Jacoby Brissett, we don't have a guy, right? We are not as good when he's not our quarterback. And so looking at that, you hope that they're being cautious with him. You hope that they're being careful. But it does seem strange that this is something he's felt in April, and it's still bothering him, and something that's not full contact. It's not full go, and you can't even get out there and work and participate now. What is it going to be like when the season starts? And remember, he started a little slow last season without having the reps and having to get healthy.
You know, I've been talking about this here the last couple of weeks, and I'm a huge Aaron Rodgers supporter, okay, for years. And the talent speaks for itself and what this guy's capable of doing. But I got to tell you, going into 2019, there probably has not been a season that I remember that there maybe have been this little expectations attached to the Green Bay Packers, given everything that's transpired. Last couple of seasons, now you have a head coach who's still very much unproven. You know, is it fair to not write this team off, but maybe have to adjust and recalibrate what we expect from them?
Well, you know, all expectations on Green Bay always hinged on Aaron Rodgers. It hinged on the fact that we thought he was the most talented passer we'd ever seen. We thought he was a quarterback that could create and do things in a manner that we've never really had the opportunity to watch in the league. And so I think the expectations were that. Last year was a down year, right? But he had 25 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. I think it's more not the off the field stuff, the non-actual football stuff that has us questioning the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers saying everything was Mike McCarthy, or you hearing about the risks that they have. Aaron Rodgers audibling, not just audibling at the line because the defense shows him something, but just changing the play because he didn't like it. And so you look at all of those things and you don't start to question if Aaron Rodgers has the talent. You start to question if Aaron Rodgers, the person, is the right guy to lead this team. And you do have a young coach now. But I think you have a defense that's going to be better. I I think it's going to be an extremely good secondary. Devontae Adams has stepped in as the number 1 receiver, and now he's proven you understand what he can do. And yes, you still have Aaron Rodgers, and he is still talented. And I think for the first time, probably motivated in a different way. So you look to keep his health. If he's healthy, I expect a year where Aaron Rodgers continues to be the MVP.
ESPN NFL analyst Ryan Clark joining us here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. There's a franchise, one that you spent a lot of time with in your career here, that it's almost like write them off at your own risk, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think that some people are guilty of that or falling into that trap this year. Le'Veon Bell's gone. Antonio Brown is gone. This is a diminished version of the Steelers. Ben is a year older. I don't know. There's something about this team that I think when they head into this season, this is a club that, again, I think they're going to pick up right where they left off and just do what the Steelers always seem to do and shock everybody.
For me, I would hope so. I think a lot of times we compare players unfairly, right? Like you see an Odell and you see some of the things he does publicly on the sideline, and you think he's a locker room killer. You think he's not a good teammate. And then everything you hear from every teammate who's ever been around him, they love him, right? They love playing with him. And then you see a guy who, like Antonio Brown, for much of the time, at least until the end of last season, people thought was the perfect teammate, right? They loved his smile. But the whole time, he was imploding the locker room inside out, right? There were things that they had to deal with each and every week that didn't only stay in the locker room, they spilled on to the field. Those things are gone. This team has already had a year without Le'Veon Bell.
Right.
They've had a year of James Conner and Samuels, and they've had a year to adjust. James Washington has had a year to learn under Antonio Brown and now step in to the second wide receiver spot. This defense should be better this year. You go out and get Devin Bush, who's one of the top defensive players in the draft, who's now playing the
He's
middle
going to win
linebacker
Defensive
spot.
Rookie of the Year. That's
and so you have all of these things going on that say, you know what? They're still a good team. They have a Super Bowl winning coach. On the other side of that, when we look at this division, where are there not questions, right? We love the Cleveland Browns on paper, right? You love what you think and expect them to be able to do offensively, but do we know?
Buyer beware.
Right? And then you have Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens and Jim Harbaugh saying, I take the over on his rushing attempts. That's not a good deal, right? You don't want a quarterback that has to run that much. And if he has to run that much, that means the passing game hasn't improved. And so this division is still could be wide open. Are you going to bet on another quarterback other than Ben Roethlisberger in this division? I don't think so. And so the Pittsburgh Steelers are square in it with the chance to represent the AFC North in the playoffs.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, right? Because there are so many questions with the two other teams. And no offense to Cincinnati, but they're not there yet. They're still a couple of years away.
Yeah, they don't even count. They're not even in the discussion. They don't factor into this discussion
not even
right now.
But the thing with the Steelers too is it all starts up front. Mm-hmm. They still have as good an offensive line as 100%. You have in the entire sport. So that's going to cover up a lot of ills. So you stay healthy. You got a quarterback who's been there before. You mentioned the studs they brought in on defense there. And with Baltimore, we talk about these players that maybe have something to prove this year. I think Lamar Jackson is also a guy, 100%. Fairly or unfairly, deserves to be on that list because now you don't have that Flacco waiting in the wings either.
And it's no plan B anymore, right?
It's him.
This is the guy we're going with. I think he was always going to have something to prove because of style of play, right? When you're a quarterback and your legs are the most important thing about you, or your legs are the most successful way for you to win, that's difficult because you're going to get hit, right? You're going to take unnecessary pounding. You're going to put unnecessary miles on you, especially when you can't threaten with the pass accurately, right? When you're not going through progressions, when teams don't have to schematically work all week to stop what you can do from a passing standpoint, it puts more pressure on you physically. And so I think Lamar Jackson is going to have to prove that he can beat people with his arm. He can throw it a mile, right? There's velocity on every ball. We just don't know where it's going most of the time. And so he has to prove that not necessarily he can be a pocket passer, because that's always the misconception. Let's stop this athlete from athleting and make him a pocket passer. That's stupid. You shouldn't have drafted him if that's what you want to do. But they need to find ways to get him clear lanes, open opportunities where he can be accurate with the ball downfield, which backs some of these players or some of these teams off the line of scrimmage.
All right, let's close out on this one here. Is there a team out there, or give me a team that you feel is going to have a pretty good season, exceed expectations, it's kind of flying under the radar a little bit?
For me, that's always a hard question because you feel like you study the teams and know who has flown I mean, who's going to?
But there's always
be
that
good.
unpredictability in the NFL, right?
Well, so one, Philadelphia Eagles are my pick to win NFC East, and I know there's a lot of this talk about the Cowboys and who the Cowboys could be and who they are, but I think that the Philadelphia Eagles are the best team. I don't necessarily know that they're flying under the radar because they have the highest paid quarterback in football, but still, to me, that is a team. Doug Peterson has shown that he can coach football. Carson Wentz has shown that he can play, and this team has made improvements in places that they needed to. They have been very meticulous about putting this team together to surround Carson Wentz with what will make him great. And for me, when, much as we talk about the Dallas Cowboys and we're talking about the Cleveland Browns and all of these teams that have done these things to improve, I think getting Carson Wentz is an upgrade over Nick Foles, having him healthy. And I think adding Jordan Howard, Deshaun Jackson, the secondary being a year older, a year more experienced, helps this team actually, I think, contend to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl.
Real quick, too. Daniel Jones takes over for Eli Manning Week what?
Week, I hope never.
Never.
Honestly, I hope.
Can he fend him off, though?
I hope I don't know. I don't know if he can. I just think there's so much scrutiny around the Daniel Jones pick, and I do believe that quarterbacks can be ruined. And I'm not saying that this kid doesn't have the talent to do it, but you look at what's going on with the wide receivers in New York. You get rid of Odell Beckham, so he's gone. You have Golden Tate, who could be suspended for 4 games right now.
Yep.
That's under repeal. Corey Coleman is out. And so there's all these things happening around these players that you need, right? It's already going to be a ton of pressure on Saquon Barkley. If Daniel Jones has to quarterback this team with protection issues, with wide receiver issues, you can have a David Carr type situation, and that's not something you want.
The line is a little bit better, though. They have upgraded that to a certain degree.
They
like
have.
the Zeitler acquisition, Remmers, put him on the right side. We know that that's a guy who started in the Super Bowl, had a rough day against Von Miller, we know. But
that's
still,
Von Miller, though.
That's Von Miller. You're not going to face Von Miller every week.
Right.
The thing with the Giants, too, you worry about Saquon, given the nature of the position, too, and what they're asking of him. You just don't want to see that guy get run into the ground, right?
They're going to ask a ton of him, and I think, to whom much is given, obviously this guy has an immense amount of talent, and he seems to want to carry the team. But right now, I think the Giants have to be smart in the ways that they use him and making sure you're getting him opportunities in space and not everything has to be earned the way we saw it last year.
ESPN NFL analyst Ryan Clark, thanks for joining me as always, my friend.
Thank you, my man. Have a good one, brother.
Good seeing you. Do you have frequent heartburn, like the kind where you have antacid stashed everywhere in case it pops up? You know what I mean. You keep some in your bag or your desk or your car or your nightstand. You have those chalky tablets ready for whenever and wherever heartburn strikes. Well, listen up. There's an easier way to deal with your heartburn. Prilosec OTC. Just 1 pill a day will last a full 24 hours with zero heartburn. Kick your antacid habit. It's possible with Prilosec OTC. Use as directed for 14 days to treat frequent heartburn, not for immediate relief. Dan Graca rolling on here on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
Carmelo wants a championship. I get it. Everybody wants a championship, right? But you have to also understand, if you're Carmelo Anthony, how you got to where you are. And as I made the point to Stephen A., he was hard-headed in a lot of regards. He was the guy that forced the trade out of Denver to New York. The Nuggets were making the playoffs consistently in the West, and then he goes to New York trying to be a star and things of that nature, and that falls apart. So then he goes to Oklahoma City, and according to Stephen A., he was told he's going to be the 4th option on that squad. But some people are talking about even coming off the bench, and you have that memorable clip of him saying, yeah, hey, man, they want me to come off the bench. I ain't coming off no bench.
Right.
So then the very next year, where do you go? You go to Houston, so they're thinking like, all right, so we brought him here. We thought he was going to be this role. It's not working out. He clearly doesn't want to be a bench player, so we're just going to let him go. Maybe another team will give him a chance. So a lot of this stuff, I feel as though Carmelo's looking at this situation as if he's a victim. And nah, bruh, you're not a victim here. Some of the things that you're experiencing were based on things you had done previously.
This sounds almost exactly like the conversation we had a few weeks ago about Chris Paul, right?
Yeah.
Like you forced your way out of some certain situations in pursuit of a championship or in pursuit of whatever it is,
Yes.
right? And I think that with Carmelo, the point is, you asked a great question of Stephen A. Who needs him outside of a team like the Sixers? There is no team that is a Melo away from winning a WNBA. Jesus Christ.
NBA.
Now I want him to play in the WNBA. Is that an option?
Sparks don't need him.
Is that an option?
Sparks don't need him. Mystics, maybe?
No, but so we're talking about a pity contract. We are. We're talking about a golden parachute, pity contract, farewell tour. He says that's not what he wants, but that's essentially.
We've seen them before, though. I mean, Gary Payton got one with the Heat.
There you go. And I would say Gary Payton. My question to you is he deserving of a pity contract? Is Carmelo deserving of an opportunity to do it his way, and at the very least, if not in pursuit of a championship, the ability to go around and say goodbye?
Let me say this. In sports, I don't think anyone deserves anything, okay? If that was the case, then Charles Barkley would have a championship. John Stockton and Karl Malone would have championships,
Sure.
okay? So Patrick Ewing would have one.
Sure.
In a lot of regards, I would say those players way more deserve it than Carmelo.
Of a championship, yes, but is he deserving of one last opportunity to say goodbye on his own terms? That's what I'm asking. A farewell tour, a
No.
2019
No.
goodbye.
No.
You know, he's only had one practice. That was just a partial practice.
The best way to put it is that the frustration is mounting.
It's his right foot bothering him more than the left foot. I did text John Gruden a short time ago, and he just said, I hope they get it figured out pretty soon because they don't have any idea what's going on there.
We like to, get the party started. We like to get them out here.
There's disappointment. That's the exact word that John Gruden used.
I think we're all disappointed. I think he's disappointed.
Their big offseason acquisition has not been able to come out here and start the party.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. at 888-SAY-ESPN. 888-729-3776 is our telephone number, and ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance, protecting commercial vehicles and offering specialized coverages designed to protect your business. More at progressivecommercial.com. Thanks again to Ryan Clark for hopping in and spending some time with me here on the program. And, when you look ahead here to the 2019 season, our colleague here at ESPN, Dominique Foxworth, one of our NFL analysts, I noticed that he put out a list of his top 5 players that have something to prove in 2019. And a few of them I agree with. A few of them I think, maybe that's pushing it a little bit. And at the top of the list, he has Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray, I know all eyes are going to be on him. When you're number one pick in the draft, especially a quarterback, that comes with the territory. I understand that full well. But I don't know if he necessarily has to show it all right away. I think there's more probably on Cliff Kingsbury's plate as the head coach that has something to prove maybe than Kyler Murray here. Okay, because you're going to expect any rookie quarterback to take their lumps and to have to experience the growing pains of playing in the National Football League. And especially given the system that he came from in Oklahoma, which is extremely pass-happy, you expect to see a lot of that, too, in the NFL with that Cliff Kingsbury offense. Just because Baker Mayfield was fairly successful last season as a rookie doesn't mean Kyler Murray is going to follow along the same path. Do I think he'll be successful in this day and age in the NFL? Yeah, I think he could be, but I don't think it's going to happen overnight necessarily. He has Derek Carr on the list. I agree wholeheartedly. We talked about Derek Carr and the Raiders situation in the last hour. Le'Veon Bell with the New York Jets. 100% I agree there because he spent a year away from football. You wonder if there's any sort of rust that's going to be left over from not being on the field. Not to mention the fact what he held out for. He wanted to get paid, which he did. And also what he means to this offense. The Jets made an investment in Le'Veon Bell, saying you're going to be one of the most dynamic players, if not the most dynamic player we've had on offense in a good long while. And you also have to be that crutch for our young quarterback, Sam Darnold, to help him to get to the next level where they think that he can ultimately lead this franchise. He also had Lamar Jackson on the list. And I think that that is a fascinating choice. Because I would agree 100%. Because Lamar Jackson is a guy who they have now given the keys to the castle to in Baltimore. All right, they kind of sort of did that last year when they sent Joe Flacco to the bench. Now Joe Flacco is playing for the Denver Broncos. And it wasn't exactly a virtuoso performance in the postseason last year for Lamar Jackson. We know that. But now you wonder how successful he's going to be knowing that it's his show. Is he going to be able to protect himself? If he is going to be one of these quarterbacks that's going to continually tuck it under and use his legs to make plays, is that sustainable? How much of a pounding is he going to take from opposing defenses? And is he going to improve when it comes to throwing the football? So Lamar Jackson, easily a choice. His last choice was Ben Roethlisberger. Why I can't necessarily go with Ben Roethlisberger there is because if Ben Roethlisberger never takes another snap in the National Football League, his legacy is secure. I don't care that Le'Veon Bell's not there and Antonio Brown is gone. All right? Ben Roethlisberger's going to the Hall of Fame, whether he plays another down or not. So I don't know if he necessarily has something to prove. His legacy is secure. Same thing with a guy like Eli Manning. I know he's in the last year of his deal, and he's trying to fend off the upstart in Daniel Jones, and eventually they're going to turn over the team to him. But Eli Manning's legacy is secure. He's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP. There's only 5 of those in NFL history. All right, Eli has nothing more to prove here with the New York Giants or in his NFL career. A couple of other names that I will throw out there, though, as far as who I think have to prove something for the upcoming season. One is Carson Wentz, who we touched on with Ryan Clark. Okay, he got the contract. Nick Foles is now playing in Jacksonville, and that was the right decision. Philadelphia choosing Carson Wentz, that was the right way to go here. But he's got to prove he can stay healthy and he can make it through a 16-game season. If he can make it through a 16-game season healthy, smart money's on Carson Wentz to maybe be the MVP in the National Football League this year. That's how good he could be. So he's got to prove that he could stay on the field. Another guy's Odell Beckham Jr. with the Cleveland Browns. We know that he's done a lot of talking. We know about the GQ interview. We know that everything that has transpired during his time with the New York Giants. Now you got out of there. Remember, the Giants were the team that was stifling your creativity, didn't let you be the person you wanted to be, didn't maximize your football ability. Well, now you're in a place and you got guys on your team that you're comfortable with, you're happy with, you think that the best is ahead of you. Now go out there and prove it. And help the Cleveland Browns into a winner. You know, they haven't won in forever. Odell in the NFL hadn't done any winning with a franchise that had Super Bowl trophies before he got there. Odell Beckham Jr.'s got a lot to prove in 2019 as far as I'm concerned. The other guy is Jimmy Garoppolo with the San Francisco 49ers, and we haven't heard a lot about him in the last year. That's kind of what happens when you have your season cut short because of injury. But this is a guy who got paid handsomely by the San Francisco 49ers. They invested a lot in him already. They believe in him. And just because you come from the Patriots system and you spent time under Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, and in flashes that you've played already in your NFL career, you've shown some good things. Well, now you got to go out there and prove it. And you got to stay healthy over the course of an entire season and help lead this 49ers team back to where they once were. And if you want to throw in winning, fulfilling your paycheck, actually living up to expectations, I'll tell you another guy who's got something to prove, in my opinion. And that's Kirk Cousins with the Minnesota Vikings. All right, this is a guy who documented his entire free agency so he could look back on it one day and laugh. And you know, there was that scene where he got off the phone with his agent and told his wife that he got the Jets up to a certain number, and they can use that now as leverage when they go to Minnesota or whoever else to get the money that he feels he's worth. Minnesota gave him, what, $84 million in guaranteed money? How did that work out in year one? They didn't even make the playoffs. Okay? If you're giving a guy all that money in guarantees, the least you can expect is to make the postseason. So if this is another playoff-less year for the Minnesota Vikings, I'm sorry. Then that, to me, goes down as an epic failure as far as I'm concerned when it comes to Kirk Cousins. If you're getting paid that kind of money, you're supposed to lift this team and maybe make them better than they are. And I think Minnesota's a good team. You've got good players in that locker room. They underachieved last year. Underachieved. And the fact that we're talking about a quarterback-driven league, Marcus Mariota, you want to throw Jameis Winston kind of like 1 and 1A, since they both came into the draft the same year, both came into the league the same year? Neither one of those guys has really sustained success with either one of their clubs. Tampa Bay hasn't even made the playoffs under Winston. Now he's got the quarterback whisperer in Bruce Arians, who we know is a terrific coach, and you think would be able to get the most football out of him. Tennessee, on the other hand, they're coming off of 9-7, 9-7, 9-7. And last year, the offense went backwards. You know, winning a playoff game, that was a couple of years ago. And I think Mariota's a gutty player. But you had Matt LaFleur there last year, and the offense was one of the worst in the National Football League. Don't you think it's about time that maybe you improve upon that a little bit and establish yourself as one of the better quarterbacks in the league? And more importantly, not have to rely on the running game as much as, let's say, Tennessee is essentially asking Mariota to do. And I like both of these guys as players. I think they're talented. But there comes a point in your career when you're 4 or 5 years in already where you say, well, if you're the franchise guy, if you're going to be everything that we think you're going to be, by now you should already have some hints and some glimpses that, all right, it's going to happen. You know, Eli Manning and the Giants, they won a Super Bowl in his 4th year. Roethlisberger helped the Steelers, even though he wasn't very good in the Super Bowl, 2nd year, winning a Super Bowl. You know, eventually, year 4, year 5, you're established by now. And that hasn't happened yet for those guys. So those are some of the folks that I think have something to prove here in 2019. When we come back, we'll turn our attention to a little bit of baseball. Now that the trade deadline is in the rearview mirror, 2 months left to ball, and now some teams are making a charge, and some are getting cold at the worst time possible. We'll talk about that. But when you're hiring, you don't want to waste time sorting through dozens of irrelevant resumes. You want an efficient way to get to a short list.
To change the narrative and speak out on behalf of how he feels. How do you think he did? If any NBA officers are watching and watch that interview, are they calling him based on what he said today?
I think it's possible. Not everybody, but I think there's a couple of teams that might be interested in them. I think you can look at the Lakers, to a lesser degree the Clippers, but I think you can look at a team like the Los Angeles Lakers or a couple of other teams around the league, like a Philadelphia or somebody that might be willing to give him a chance. I do believe that, because if the man is telling you about locker room leadership, he's telling you about how he's willing to play and accept a relegated role and all of those kind of things. Melo has been universally liked throughout his NBA career. He's not a guy that's been hated and despised and has been considered to be a locker room cancer that steps away from the franchise, talks behind people's back, makes news and headlines for the wrong reasons out, or off the basketball court in regards to his basketball career, that is. It's something. He doesn't do that. So that's not who he has been. And if you talk to him, I think that if you watch the interview with him this morning, you see a man that is clearly, as Michael Lees pointed out, has clearly been humbled, clearly recognizes that times have changed and he is no longer what he used to be, but still feels he can give you something. And, guys, I will remind you of this. Jared Dudley, no disrespect to him at all, very good guy. Jared Dudley was on the Brooklyn Nets last year. He just signed with the Los Angeles Lakers. You don't think Melo could give you something like that?
Right.
Come on now.
Yeah. No, you're
We
right.
know better.
Yeah.
You're right. Well, let me ask you this, Stephen A. If what team needs Melo? Like if you're looking for a dude to come off the bench that can, give you 12 to 15 points in limited action, or maybe sometimes you can go off for 20 points. You're a team that's looking to win a championship that can help you in the regular season, and when you get to the playoffs, can be that Vinnie Johnson type player coming off the bench. What team in the league needs Melo?
Didn't you just hear me say Philadelphia 10 times?
They need some shooters.
They need what? But
They need some shooters.
Philly.
Philadelphia. You're right. You got to remember, they lost J.J. Redick, and they lost Jimmy Butler. Now, you got Josh Richardson, but you still have Embiid, Simmons, Al Horford, okay? So when you look at it from that perspective, where's your bench? What you got coming off your bench?
Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. 888-SAY-ESPN, our telephone number, 888-729-3776. If you missed any of the show today, go check it out on demand in the Stephen A. Smith podcast, brought to you by the Capital One Quicksilver Card, earning unlimited 1.5% cash back on every purchase, everywhere. What's in your wallet? I was thinking about it, too. A caller we had in the first hour called about the Patriots, and I don't know if I properly addressed the question he asked, so I'll do it now because it's been bothering me. I want to be honest with you people. No. The answer that he asked was, will we ever see anything like this, the run the Patriots have been on for the last 2 decades? The answer is no. Given the salary cap era and where the game is now, where teams are good to bad from one year to the next and all the parity that's ensued and the unpredictable nature, no, we will never see a run that the Patriots have had for this long moving forward in the NFL. And that's why, whether you love him, whether you hate him, Kevin Mawai gave a shout out to Bill Belichick in his Hall of Fame speech the other night and said, I still hate the Patriots, but I respect the heck out of them, and everybody hates the winners. So you at least have to tip your cap as far as that is concerned. As far as the baseball is concerned, though, it's funny how things change because a week ago, Sunday, the Boston Red Sox were getting ready to finish off a 4-game sweep of the New York Yankees up at Fenway Park, their arch rival. Yankee starting pitching was getting bashed, and it looks like they had no answers. And then the Yanks were able to salvage that finale on Sunday. And since then, the Boston Red Sox have not been able to get up off the mat. They get swept by the Tampa Bay Rays at Fenway earlier in the week, and then they come back down to New York here for this weekend and lose a 4-game series. Chris Sale gets absolutely annihilated on Saturday afternoon. He's barking back and forth with the home plate umpire. And then David Price again proved that he just can't pitch against the Yankees in that stadium. Forget about October, regular season. It doesn't matter. So the Boston Red Sox right now are in a world of trouble. They're 7 games out right now in the loss column for that second wild card. They've lost 8 in a row. Starting pitching has been up and down at best all season long. The bullpen does not have a reliable answer in the back end at all. And look, we've seen this from teams that come off a World's Championship, right? It's bound to happen. And that's why if you're a Red Sox fan, I mean, think about how many World Series you've won in the last, 12, 13 years. Okay, you don't really get too consumed over a year like this. If it finishes with the Red Sox outside of the postseason picture, you live with it. It's not the end of the world. This team is going to reload and be right back in the mix again next season. Nothing is happening with the Red Sox. As far as the Yankees are concerned, though, this was a huge weekend for them. Because as I said, their starting pitching was a complete mess. And instead of just the starting pitching, they had to get back to playing good baseball. Start feeling good about themselves again because they stood pat at the trade deadline. People were very critical of Brian Cashman, myself included, for not bringing in at least some sort of a starting pitching option. So for them to go out there and beat the Sox in 4 games, get decent starting pitching, I think you take that. Yanks have the American League East wrapped up. They've had it won for the last 2 months. You don't have to worry about that. But they do lose a couple of more pieces. Aaron Hicks, Edwin Encarnacion. You just hope they could get to the end of the season in one piece. Thanks to Ryan Clark for stopping by. Thanks to everybody for calling, listening, tweeting. We appreciate it. We'll do it again tomorrow at 1 o'clock for Stephen A. Smith. It's Dan Graca in for Stephen A.